This meeting is being recorded.
So a very good morning to all of you, and we love to welcome you to the I think the 15th color talk of ICA-Belgium. ICA-Belgium, for the ones who don't know, we try to make a bridge between science and design, art and industry, and also grow awareness about the importance of color in all those different fields. And I think we have two very great speakers today. One will take us to the future in the talk of Stephen, and one will take us to the past with Ulrike. So Maya, I give the word to you now.
Thank you, Jeanette. So good morning, hi, and everyone, welcome. I am really honored to introduce to you today Ulrike Koch-Brinkmann. Ulrike is a German archaeologist. She holds a doctorate in classical Greek painting from the Ruhr University in Bochum. She worked as a scientific researcher at the University of Munich and has also been teaching at the Universities of Augsburg and the Karl August University in Göttingen. With her husband, archaeologist Vincent Brinkmann, she studies and reconstructs the colors of ancient sculptures. The physical reconstructions that they create are all painted by her. Their work can be seen at the Liebiger Haus Sculpture Collection in Frankfurt, as well as through the traveling exhibition Gods in Color that was presented until today in 28 locations around the world, such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, British Museum in London, Vatican Museums, and Copenhagen, Athens, Istanbul, San Francisco, just to name a few. And the latest exhibition, Antiquity in Color, is at the moment on view at the Gallo-Roman Museum in Tongeren in Belgium. It is there that Jeanette and myself actually had the chance to meet Ulrike and take part in her really very, very interesting workshop. And we are very happy that she accepted our invitation to speak at our color talk. So Ulrike, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning to everyone, and I'm really honored that you asked me for this talk, and I would like to visit with you. I will start with my presentation, so just a moment. Okay. I will start with a visit to a museum, a typical museum of ancient Greek and Roman sculpture. So it's not any museum, it's, in my opinion, the museum, the Acropolis Museum in Athens. You see here, it's placed directly in the neighborhood of the famous Parthenon on the Acropolis of Athens. If you visit the gallery of the sculptures from the 6th century BC until 480, this 480 BC is a very important date because it's the moment the powerful army of the Persians destroyed the sanctuaries of the Acropolis in Athens totally. So in this gallery, you have you can join all these sculptures which were standing in the so-called archaic period on the Acropolis in Athens. And if you come near to one of these sculptures, this is a rider wearing clothes in this Scythian style with a lot of different pattern, you will see, without any technical or scientific help, color remnants from pigments painted directly on the marble surface of the sculpture. The opaque pigment layer, like you can see here in the, do you see my cursor? I hope so. On the right-hand side, you see the opaque thick pigment layer which is applied directly on the marble surface. Another example is this female sculpture, also showing rich remnants of color you see with your naked eye, but you have to be prepared with some knowledge about the alteration of pigments, because you see today only very darkish, bluish, blackish pigments, residues. But if you come near, you see that the very vivid mineral pigments are originally blue, changing step by step to green, or on the right side, you see cinnabar changing to metacinnabar, which is black. So you need some knowledge about the alteration of pigments to understand what you can see in the museums. Now you may ask whether this total covering of the marble by pigments is something which is typical for the early style of Greek art. And in this moment, I have to disappoint you, because going through time, for example, here, when we're visiting the famous so-called Alexander sarcophagus in the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul, he was made end of the 4th century BC, so we are now 200 years later. We have a lot of wonderful painted details. And I want to show you in detail that the white of the eye is painted. So also for white, for the color white, never the marble itself was used, but the white was always painted with different materials. Another example, we are now in the 2nd century BC, so we are going over in steps by 200 years, something like this. We have this female statue wrapping herself in a mantle. She's coming from Delos, from the island of Delos. Today, she is in the National Museum in Athens. So she is created in the Hellenistic, so-called Hellenistic epoch. And you see on the right side the very tiny and exact painted ornaments. They are placed here on the right. No, it's the left side of her undergarment. So, and last but not least, we go into the Roman period. We are here in the 2nd century AD. So it's perhaps the time of Hadrian or Mark Aurel. And you see on the high polished marble surface of this ideal female head, perhaps from a goddess, you see some spots. These spots are not dirt, but remnants of her skin color. So you see these apricot rose hue of her skin color. So you can look at 100, 1,000 of sculptures, and you will find also with the naked eye some remnants of colors. So the evidence proved that ancient marble sculpture in Greece and Rome, from the archaic to the late Roman times, were always painted. But why we are not aware of this fact? And the reason for this is that all the colorful examples we have seen were excavated in the 19th century by scholars, by archaeologists, by architects who were highly interested in the issue of polychromy. And the common destiny of a marble sculpture is more like this. You can see here on a historic photograph from a Greek island where a fragment of a marble sculpture is used for some mural constructions. So this is the common destiny of ancient Greek and Roman sculpture, used, reused for buildings and so forth. And the weathering of centuries has disturbed, of course, every color remnants. So it's something like a whitewashing by nature. So this is the reason why it was so easy to create a new perception of ancient art in the era of the Renaissance, sorry for this. For example, 1506, this famous group of Laocoon was found in Rome. And this group became very influential for all the great Renaissance artists like Michelangelo and so on. A new taste, a new aesthetics was born. This aesthetics is the absolute opposite of ancient aesthetics. In the time of the Parthenon, of the Acropolis in Athens was built, the play writer Euripides is looking for a metaphor for total ugliness. And this is, for him, a whitewashed marble sculpture. So until the Renaissance, let's say beginning with Egypt or Mesopotamia in the 3rd millennium BC, so let's say over 5,500 years, sculpture without color was just unfinished and meaningless. Color is meaning. If we look to Egypt, we have a lot of evidence for this. I have here only the example of the Pharaoh Hatshepsut. So we are here in the middle of the 2nd millennium BC. Hatshepsut is depicted as a sphinx. So with lion body, it's the face of Hatshepsut combined with a lion body. And his mane is blue. So we have in Egypt, and this is very clear because we have not only the color, but also the hieroglyphs, and we can combine both together. So we know very exactly what we see. We have in Egypt a kind of hierarchy of colors, and blue is the color of power and protection. So in a way, on the next level to gold and silver. So you have in Egypt, and imagine this from the 3rd millennium BC. You remember the huge pyramids of Gizeh, for example, built in this time. You have an immense need of blue color. Here's a detail of this blue mane. And you have in nature only a few crystals, a few minerals who are really blue. Here, for example, and now we are on the jewelry of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. we have the very famous and worthful lapis lazuli, for example, and you can recognize here that this gemstone is combined, the blue gemstone. So also here in this parts, we have original lapis lazuli, also here and here, here, for example, and here. But in other parts, we have blue glass. So it's the most important point is to have something blue. Where the blue is coming from is on the second level. So there is no problem to combine in this jewelry the real gemstone with the imitation in glass. And this is really, here another example, it's also from a sarcophagus from the time from Tutankhamun. We have the combination also of gemstones, the red are gemstones, together with imitations in a light and a darker blue glass and inserted in a gilded wooden sarcophagus. So the immense need of blue color in Egypt was the starting point, in a way, to invent at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC, so 5,000 years ago, to invent the synthetic pigment made from copper and sand, the so-called Egyptian blue. This Egyptian blue is extremely durable to light, of course, but also to heat. Here are some of our experiments. So also in fire around 800 or 900 degrees, the color changes only slightly. Coming back to Greece, and around 500 BC, so in a phase of an intensive cultural exchange with Egypt, we can look again on this rider, on the pigments of this rider. He, or most probably she, is wearing clothes with exceptional rich pattern and clearly visible pigments. Here are some new details. Here are some further ones. With intense scientific research, most of the pigments can be analyzed, and they are coming from the silver mines of Laurion. This is really interesting that in the south of Attica, the pigments were produced. So in the archaic period of Athens, of Attica, they used their own pigments found at the silver mines of Laurion. If you have this crystal, like it's showing here, for example, here we have some azurite, here some malachite, ochre earth, hematite here in the middle. If you have rocks like this, you can imagine to get some pigments is a very time-consuming and intense process. the last steps are a kind of levigation, a washing and grinding process to get a real, colorful and vibrant and intense hue. So our process of research is since 30 years. We started 40 years ago. And then 30 years, we incorporate experimental archaeology in a way. So we try to make reconstructions as a partner in a way, not only as part, but also as an active partner in our research work. Here you see just the scanning process of this sculpture in the, here it's the old Acropolis Museum. And here are some images from the reconstructing process. It's not only about painting, but it's also about the construction work, the geometrical construction work you have to do before you can start with the painted, but we will see more details later. So this is the result you can see also today in the exhibition in Hungary. And here we see only colors which we analyzed, which we identified, which we have identified on the original, the ancient original. So there is a next step. We have a lot of real evidence from the original Scythian clothes today in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. And these archaeological comparanda show that these original Scythian clothing combined several materials. So it's a kind of patchwork technique. And on top of these gold paillettes were added. So we offer, this is hypothetically, we have no traces on the original itself, but we offer this interpretation to the visitor in the museum to become aware of the possibilities, of the technical possibilities we can imagine in the 6th century BC. The next example, you are remembering it perhaps, it's this female statue from Delos with the tiny colorful details, is showing another aspect of experimental archaeology as we are practicing. So you see here on the right side some remnants of the pattern of this weave band painted with Egyptian blue. And as you saw before, fire and Egyptian blue will not change anything. So it's such a durable pigment. On the other hand, you have a lot of blackish traces on the mantle of this woman. And you perhaps see here the rays, the blackish rays going into the marble surface. And it was a long process of experimenting and researching before we recognized that these blackest traces are the remnants of burnt malachite. So they use the copper carbonate malachite for the mantle, but it was destroyed by fire, the whole polychromy of the sculpture, and so the green pigment turned to black, to gouache black. So it's only an example for all these time-consuming small steps you have to go in the whole research process until you can finish. No reconstructions ever finished, but before you get an image like this you have here, and every detail is based on some research, scientific research or archaeological research. I would like to show you one example in more detail, this whole research process. It's the Sphinx from the final of the mega-class grave stele in New York, in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And you see here with the naked eyes a lot of structures which forms some patterns on the breast, and here some feathers on the wing, and you see with the naked eye the brown, reddish brownish color of the hair. If you come near, you see here, for example, remnants of the azurite, always painted directly on the marble. The marble, by the way, is the most perfect painting ground you can imagine. So you need no additional layers to cover the material the sculpture is made of, as you need for limestone, for example, or as you need for terracotta. On marble, you can paint directly without any ground layer, something like this. You see here, you are now trained from the beginning of my little talk that these scale-like feathers were painted originally in red. So it's some remnants of cinnabar still visible, and the surface of the cinnabar is turned into meta-cinnabar, so it's more blackish. On another scale, you see very tiny but visible blue remnants of azurite. There are a lot of scientific methods to analyze color materials and color schemes. Here, for example, the XRF mapping, so X-ray fluorescence mapping, where you can recognize very exactly the different elements. For example, the red one is the mercury of the cinnabar, the blue one is the copper of the azurite, and the white one is remnants of lead, and here some remnants, it's the surrounding of the scale-like feathers of iron oxides. And there are further methods. This is a very, very nice photographic method to detect Egyptian blue. It's an infrared luminescence, and you see that the space between the feather tips are colored with a light Egyptian blue. So I don't want to go into details, but you see how many steps are necessary to come from the original over a scan, over a print, over a lot of measurements, a lot of re-researching on the original to the reconstruction itself. So, like I said before, the reconstruction is always an active partner in the whole research process. Here you see some UV photographs and also some false color enhanced photographs where you can document every single form, every single detail of the painting style of the feathers, of the breast and of the wing, for example. So you have to combine a lot of details, a lot of drawings before you can start to paint on the copy, on the reconstruction itself. We are using also some UV vis spectroscopy technology. This helps us to create some color mappings all over the surface of the whole three-dimensional surface of the sculpture. In this case, we made over 600 scans, and so we have a huge base of information to answer the question, what color is painted where? Pigment preparation, in this case, it's azurite, and you see here in this example, you see that the grain size plays an important role. So it's an absolutely necessary information you need from the original, how big the grain size of the used pigments are, because the grain size of the pigments, on the grain size of the pigments depends in a way the hue of the color in the end itself. And you see here we make always some test panels, and we researched these test panels with the help of the UV vis spectroscopy to get a real match, to come really near to the original color scheme. This is from Egypt again. But you see, there are a lot of very interesting traditions. For example, if you have to construct, to paint some, it's a wing of a bird, a part of a wing of a bird here from the Hatshepsut Hall today in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. If you want to paint these scale-like feathers, you can't start at one point and end on the other. You need some aid, you need some construction aid. And in this case, we can see they used grids, geometrical measured grids. And in these grids, you can very easily paint your feathers, your scales. So we copied this process step by step for the reconstruction. You see here several stages. And in the end, there are always some difficult questions to solve, like the fur color of the line body, where we have very less remnants, and the whole research process was a cooperation with the colleagues, with the scientists and conservators of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. So there was a lot of discussions, and it was a process over 2 years to get common results. And the question for the fur color was a really special issue. And so we used, our team, we used some archaeological comparanda to show that a lion body without this yellow color this is the Egyptian example we saw before, the Sphinx from Hatshepsut, and here you see a contemporary Sphinx from the National Museum in Athens with some visible remnants of the yellow fur color. And so you have, it's always an intense process to get all the results together and to decide what the next step of the reconstruction will be. In the end, this was the result exhibited in the Chroma exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And you see the reconstruction as a model for the traces of polychromy we know until today is presented beneath the original here in the showcase. And in the background, you see a reconstruction of the whole grave stele. So for me, for our team, this is something like an ideal situation, how museums, in our opinion, should present Greek and Roman sculpture. So in a way, every museum has some sculpture with perhaps only tiny, but with color residues. So every museum would be able to create an educative space like this we see here at the Metropolitan. So thank you very much for your patience.
Ulrike, thank you very much. This was an incredibly interesting and insightful presentation, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that, you know, I could listen to this all day long. So thank you so much. And maybe just before we go on with the next presentation, just to tell you that if you have a chance, you could visit the exhibition Antiquity in Color at the Gallo-Roman Museum in Tongeren. It is held until June, until the beginnings of June. And for those that don't know, Tongeren is the oldest Belgian city, and it's actually quite accessible. So it's very near the Netherlands, the Germany, and if you go through Brussels, you can maybe reach it in 1 hour. So it is a beautiful city by itself. And I'd like to mention that the ICA-Belgium, we were invited by the museum to offer to create a workshop that builds on the exhibition. And so we have created a workshop that is going to be held on the 27th of April, which is a Saturday. It's going to be one-day workshop. So it builds on this inspiration from the exhibition on the polychromy of the color that is seen in the sculptures. And adds to it, you know, the symbolism and the stories that come with those colors. So we start with the color mapping, and we take it further to develop this through a process, a creative process that can be used in the design or artwork creation. It is open to anyone that is interested in color, in art, in history. but especially, of course, to the professionals that work with color or would like to work with color more, and to find the different methods of working with color and including it into their creative process. So if you're interested, I'll put the link into the chat. You can see more information on our website. And just send us an email if you have a further question, or even in the chat or later in the questions, you can just simply ask us. So thank you, and I give the word to Jeanette, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
So I first also would like to see this beautiful leaflet Maya made, very impressive. So you can find all the information about the workshop on the website of ICA-Belgium. Also, if you would go to Tongeren, I would really recommend this book. It's actually only in Dutch and French, unfortunately, but we just heard from Ulrike that there's a lot of information about the exhibition on the website of the Met, so we will share that later on also with you. So our next speaker, wait, I have to change this a bit. Our next speaker is Stephen Westland. Stephen is a professor of color science and technology in the School of Design at the University of Leeds. He researches and teaches in the areas of color design, color imaging, color literacy, and machine learning. He is a member of the Color Literacy Project and co-author of the textbook Universal Principles of Color. He has published over 200 peer-reviewed papers and received the Davies Medal from the Royal Photographic Society 2008 for his research in color. He was president of the Society of Dyers and Colorists and holds several visiting professorships at universities in the UK, USA, and China. We just heard about the colors of the past, but now we are going into the future with a talk of Stephen, Color Nowcasting, AI and Sustainability. This presentation will explore color trends in the context of the fashion and textile industry. The use of AI to predict color trends will be explored, and the possibility of using AI to predict what colors are trending now, so-called color nowcasting. I had the privilege to hear this talk at the AIC Congress in Thailand, and I was very impressed with all the things that can happen in the future and the changes that are possible with AI. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeanette. Let me just put my presentation up, not that one. So good morning, everyone. And I'd like to thank the ICA for inviting me to speak today. It's very much appreciated. As Jeanette said, I did give this talk in Thailand at AIC meeting recently. This is a slightly reduced version though, because that was a slightly longer talk, but I still hope you'll find it interesting. So I want to talk, as Jeanette said, in the area of fashion and textiles, and talk about something that I refer to as color nowcasting. I have to say though that I could be talking about many other industries. It's just today I'm going to focus mainly on fashion. And of course, we all love fashion, and it's a very glamorous industry, as you can see from this image, but it has a less glamorous side. So as a species, we produce about 100 billion garments every year. The average USA consumer throws away about 81 pounds of clothing every year, which I guess is about 40 kilos. And what happens to this clothing? Well, actually, surprisingly, most of it ends in landfill, 92 million tons per year. This is what happens. And you might think, well, why is that? And it's mainly because most textile products cannot actually be recycled. There are technical reasons for that, and people are doing lots of great research to try to make it better. But currently, the majority of textiles that we produce and throw away end in landfill, often via a sort of low-wage economy first, which has been flooded with this sort of stuff. So this is not very healthy for the environment at all. But to make it worse, it's not only what happens at the end, but also what happens at the beginning. Because about 6 years ago, there's an article in the BBC that Burberry were burning bags, clothes, and perfume worth millions. These were things that they literally couldn't sell. So they'd never touched a consumer. And I don't want to particularly criticize Burberry because they're one of our partners and we work with them closely and they're a fantastic company. It's not only Burberry, it's the whole fashion industry. So here's another article saying that H&M accused of burning 12 tons of new unsold clothing per year. And this has an incredible impact on our environment. So many of you may have seen this fact before, but to make one cotton t-shirt requires nearly 3,000 litres of water, and not just any water, clean water, which is an incredibly shocking statistic. And as you know, a shortage of water in the future is probably going to become as serious as shortage of energy. So basically, we're making too many clothes that we can't sell. We're buying too many clothes, and most clothes can't be recycled, and the majority end up in landfill. So this is not a very happy picture, and it's the context of the research that I'm going to describe to you now. Part of the problem or part of the solution is colour forecasting. So colour forecasting, hopefully many people are familiar with it. It's there's a very nice infographic from a company called Hue Data, which I'll mention later on, showing these industries where colour is incredibly important in terms of consumer behaviour. And yes, it's a process by which groups of experts try to predict which colours consumers will want to buy, usually about 18 months in advance. And it's been that way really since about the 1960s. There has long been a controversy about whether colour forecasting is part of the problem or is part of the solution. So this is an image from Tracy Cassidy's book from just over 10 years ago, looking at the positive view of colour forecasting, that it's a saviour to industry. It helps companies meet consumer demand and leads to a healthy industry. And other people have a more negative viewpoint, that it's a hindrance to industry, not really meeting consumer demand at all, and encouraging overconsumption. And I'm afraid I'm on the right-hand side of this diagram. I have to say, I'm not a fan of colour forecasting. I think it's part of the problem rather than part of the solution. But it's actually a necessary evil, because I mentioned that colour forecasters try to predict which colours are going to be popular in 18 months. And the reason for that is it generally takes about 18 months. 18 months from creative decisions being made about colour to those garments being designed fully, manufactured, shipped, retailed, and end up with the consumer. So, you know, it's really difficult for companies. They need some guidance about how to do this, how to choose these colors, and color forecasting is the sort of that is their often their guiding light. So they tend to make predictions or forecasts maybe twice a year, and it's necessary because of this manufacturing retail supply chain, which is about 18 months long. So I think there are two problems with it. One, I think, is it encourages people to buy too many clothes when people could just stick with the ones that they've got. And I also, I should say, I'm not the only person who thinks that. Here's an article from a few years ago saying our obsession with color trends is killing the planet. And it's really time to stop doing this. And I've actually spoken to many senior figures in fashion companies, and you know, most of them sort of agree with this. You know, they understand that the way that we're consuming textiles is literally unsustainable. It cannot go on. But at the same time, they have got shareholders to answer to. It's a really difficult situation for them. And then the other reason I don't really like color forecasting is I don't really think it's accurate. We have this very large project at Leeds, government-funded project called Future Fashion Factory, actually. And we have, I think, over 500 companies as part of our network in this project, mainly UK companies, but some with a big international footprint. And you know, when we speak to those and say, well, why is it you're making things that you can't sell, so-called dead stock? They will say, well, there are many reasons. Maybe they've got the price wrong, maybe the style is wrong, all sorts of reasons. Maybe the fabric is the wrong type of fabric. But many of them say to me that they believe the biggest reason they can't sell these things is that they're the wrong color. They're making things in colors that people don't want. So that's the thing that's sort of driven my belief that color forecasting might not be very accurate. But actually, as Jeanette hinted at the beginning, change is really coming. It's coming quite fast, and it's coming whether people want it to come or not. So I give a lecture every year on AI and the fashion industry to fashion design students at Leeds. And when I gave it this year, which was last month, I had to completely rewrite it because the landscape's changed so much in 1 year. And last year, when I asked students whether they'd heard of generative AI, almost none of them had. This year, not only had they all heard of it, they're all using it as part of their design process. So for people who aren't familiar with it, the biggest issue in AI at the moment is around generative tools. These are chatbots, things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, and also things that can generate images. Some of those generative tools are now found in things like Photoshop. So on the bottom left on this diagram, you can see an original image and then the use of generative fill to create that car and its image in the water. And actually, I should say the generative fill, you simply give a few words like add a picture of a car to this, and it just does it automatically. And then literally 2 or 3 weeks ago, OpenAI produced something called Sora, which creates a whole movie sequence that's photorealistic based on just a few terms. So, you know, there's a lot of change happening. But I'm actually quite old, and one of the things that's an advantage, there aren't many advantages to being old, but one of them is we've seen things before sometimes. And it turns out that this fascination with AI is not the first time we've been here. So the first time was in the 1960s, 1970s, when people became really interested in something called the perceptron. Everybody got very excited about it, but the technology overpromised and underdelivered. And we had what was called the AI winter, the first AI winter, where people lost interest. And then again, in the 80s, we had something called the multi-layer perceptron. People got really excited about that. New hopes. I was part of a team at University of Kiel in Staffordshire. We developed a new program called Machine Perception and Neurocomputing. But guess what? The technology overpromised and underdelivered, and we had the second AI winter. And we're now into what I would call the third era of AI. And I have colleagues, really serious colleagues, who understand a lot more about AI than I do, who say the same thing's going to happen. You know, people are overestimating what this technology can do. And sooner or later, we're going to end up with a third AI winter. And is that the case? You know, is it going to be different this time or not? Well, I actually think it probably will be different this time. I do say probably. And the reason for this is it's not just about AI this time. It's about lots of other things that are happening, the unprecedented computing power that we had, unimaginable power, you know, compared to when I started my degree in 1980 at Leeds University, when computers didn't even have hard drives. We also have the potential for things like commercial fusion, which can produce almost unlimited energy, biotechnology, quantum computing, robotics. And just as an example, I want to show you this. This was released this week, so it's literally about 3 days old. And OpenAI, who make chatbots, have partnered with a robotics company. And this is the demo that they released. It's about 1.5 minutes long. Let's play it.
Hey, figure one, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Great, can I have something to eat?
Sure thing.
Great. Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
Great. So based on the scene right now, where do you think the dishes in front of you go next?
The dishes on the table, like that plate and cup, are likely to go into the drying rack next.
Great. Can you put them there?
Of course.
All right. So how do you think you did?
I think I did pretty well. The apple found its new owner, the trash is gone, and the tableware is right where it belongs.
I agree. Thanks, figure one.
You're welcome. If there's anything else you need help with, just let me know.
So this would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. And I do think the advances are going to become ever greater. Here's an article that says that the clothing and footwear industry has slashed its delivery lead times by almost half since 2020. That between 2020 and 2022. So as we have increased automation and robotics in manufacturing industry, what if that supply chain gets reduced from 18 months to 18 weeks, and then 18 days, and maybe less? What does that do to our society and the way we think about color forecasting? Actually, in China, there already are some companies who can manufacture clothes literally in days using automation. So it is 100% coming. And I like this phrase in this article, a demand-driven buying process, which we'll come back to in a second. So this is the model that we're talking to many companies about in the UK. It's the idea that consumers would probably buy most of their products online. They may even co-design some of these products. And it's only at the point that they're sold that they're manufactured. So we don't manufacture anything until it's been sold, and then it's shipped to the consumer. And there's some other nuances on this, but I won't go into those at this stage. Like, for example, people maybe being prepared to wait for greener delivery methods rather than expecting it the very next day. But the point about this is, if we don't make anything until it's already sold, there is no waste. There is no dead stock. There is no burning of 12 million tons of fabric by H&M. It just doesn't happen. So I think this is an incredibly good thing, you know, and people can argue about the positive and negative aspects of AI and computing on society, but this is something I think is a really good thing. So the introduction of what I call rapid agile manufacturing is disrupting already the traditional color forecasting process, because companies will be less interested in what consumers want in 18 months' time and more interested in what they want next week or even now. So traditional color forecasting is an expert-driven process. It's slow and it makes predictions. On the other hand, color nowcasting is consumer-driven rather than expert-driven. It's fast rather than slow. And instead of making predictions, it literally measures what's happening. It's a term I think was introduced maybe by my PhD student, Pewa, in 2022. And the idea here is that we can understand consumers' behavior in real time by looking at their data, for example, their text on Twitter, their sales data, their images on Instagram. And what we'd like to do is extract from images the dominant colors. And of course, humans can do this very well. In fact, humans can do it better than any of the systems I've developed. But that isn't really the point, because we want to do this for literally thousands, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of images every single day. It literally cannot be done by humans. And people who work in color forecasting are already struggling to deal with the huge amount of data from fashion shows. Literally just the number of images you see coming from fashion shows is hard to assimilate. So we're looking for methods that can automatically extract the dominant colors, maybe it's these three here, for example, from an image in real time, so that we can provide this real-time feedback data that companies may want. Although it's a very easy task to do visually for humans, for machines it's very difficult. But I want to show you one thing which I showed in Thailand, which is that a lot of people think that machine learning is a very complicated process and they could never understand it. but I want to show that sometimes it's an incredibly simple process and everybody can understand it. And I can teach students with a design background and no programming prior experience to do this and code this in less than an hour. It's incredibly simple. And I want to demonstrate how simple it is with this example. Say we take this picture of a bag. We start off with 5 random colors. It can be any 5. In this case, we've got a red, a green, a blue, and a yellow. Red, green, blue, yellow, and a sort of very light gray. You can hardly see it. And the first step is we take each pixel on the image on the left and say, which of these 5 target colors is it closest to? And on the right, you can see now all the images closest to the gray one are colored gray on the right-hand side. All the ones closest to the green one are colored green, and so on and so forth. So this assigns every pixel on the left image to one of 5 clusters. We then simply average the colors over on the left here of all the pixels in the first cluster, all the pixels in the second cluster, and that gives us this. And basically, that is it. That is all it is, right? Because we now have 5 new colors, and we just start the process again. We start with 5 new colors, find out which of these pixels is closest to each of these, producing this, average those, produces that. We go around again 2, 3 times, and you can see by the time we've been through it, just half a dozen iterations, taking fractions of a second, we've automatically got these 5 colors here on the right as being dominant colors in the image on the left. And it's done a pretty good job, and it's an incredibly simple method that's been around. So there's lots of tools on the internet. You can sort of load up an image, this sort of very simplistic mood board, for example. You can load it up and it will generate the dominant colors. At one point, Adobe had some sort of tool on the internet. I think they called it Adobe Cooler. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a feature in Photoshop now. And these tools are all using this very, very simple but machine learning method called K-means. It works quite nicely. For people who are technical, people often argue that when you decide about which pixels are closest to which colors, then you should think about, well, what space are we doing it in? Are we doing it in RGB space? Are we doing it in some sort of perceptually uniform or meaningful space like CLab? I've been doing this for 10 years, and I honestly don't think it makes any difference. I don't think it's a big issue which space we're doing it in. And even though it's an old algorithm, people are still producing new variants of it. So this is a paper that we published with AXA and Nobel, who in the UK are very famous for the Dulux paint brand, where they wanted to extract colors from mood boards, for example. And one of the problems sometimes with K-means, this method, is it produces colors a little bit sort of duller, a little bit less chromatic than they perhaps should be. This green, for example, isn't perhaps quite what we'd like it to be. Maybe even this purpley color. So we developed a new method during our collaboration with them that a couple of years ago we published. And this new method basically produces, it's more likely to produce colors that are more vivid and chromatic. And they're using this is the Dulux webpage. You can see images of interiors and then automatic extraction of colors from those images. Also interesting that you can play around with spatial extent. So, you can see these colors at the bottom below each image occupy more space if the color is more occupying more space in the image, basically. And they're doing some other things on their webpage to do with personalization, but beyond the scope of this presentation. So we can generate colors from images really, really easily. And on the left, you can see an image from Instagram. And going back to this color nowcasting thing, we want to extract the color of these clothes. So we want to get these colors, this black, brown, blue, and I don't know. I'm not very good at color names, but maybe a pale brown, let's say. However, if you do k-means, you get these colors on the right, which are not right at all. And the reason for that is it looks at the whole image. It's easy to extract the dominant colors from a whole image, but that isn't what we want. We want the colors of the actual clothes. So we have to do something a bit more fancy. Unfortunately, that does involve more complicated machine learning. So in this case, we used a pre-trained deep learning neural network. These are the buzzwords to recognize where people were in images. And this is the same network which is being used in driverless cars by people like Google to recognize if there's a pedestrian. And you can see that it recognizes these people here, and the number above is indication of how confident it is that that is a person. So this guy here in the middle is the one it thinks it's really sure about. So we can use that. We analyzed the whole fashion show by Burberry, and we took pictures. On the left, you can see a picture of someone on a fashion runway. If we simply analyze this image, we'd get all these horrible background colors, this floor, which we're not interested in. But you can just see the yellow outline here of the people detection algorithm. We can basically now narrow into this, and then a little bit more work. We can basically grab, roughly speaking, an outline of that person and only analyze those colors and ignoring these background colors. And what this gives us is, for this particular image, this fashion model, the three colors at the bottom are the three colors you would get if you just applied that very simplistic k-means to the whole image, because these colors are the dominant colors in this image. The clothes are relatively small amount of space. This is the biggest thing here, and then all of this black around here. On the other hand, using method of people detection, then k-means, you can see we get these three colors, which are much more representative of the clothes. So it's a much better way to do it. And we test our algorithms by having what we call a psychophysical experiment, where we ask people to select the colors of the clothes on these images. And you can see here, three colors picked by a human. And this nice white, for example, is in the trim here. And you can see we're not getting that, but this is a lot closer to this, I would argue, than is this one over here. That's the most important thing. And we're interested in, this is a sideline, which in Thailand, I went into more detail about this, but we're interested in ways of working out whether this algorithm is producing a closer match to these three colors than this algorithm. And you might say, well, yes, of course it is. It's obvious it is. But if we're doing this for hundreds and thousands of images, we need a method. We can't just look at it. And we did some work on that, and that's another paper that we published predicting visual similarity between color palettes. So although our method is better, it's still problematic. It picks up sometimes the skin colors, for example, of the model, which get merged into here, which is why we lose the white. To do that, we use the more sophisticated, and this is getting really sort of contemporary now, we wanted to take this image on the left, this street style fashion image, and convert it to this image on the right automatically, where we have all the pixels have been assigned to one of, I think, 5 classes. Black, which is background, yellow, which is clothes, magenta, which is skin, cyan, which is hair, and green, which is accessories. So we had lots of students at Leeds who were paid in Photoshop to generate the image on the right from the image on the left. And then we want to train a neural network. So if we give it an image on the left, it'll produce this image on the right. So we need what's called training data or labeled data. It's quite laborious to produce it. So we had 2,000 street style images, and we basically trained our network on that system. And here's an example of how well it worked. So the image on the left is the original image, and then the ground truth is what the students produced. This is what we'd like to have if it's perfect. And the middle one is what our network's producing. Doing a pretty good job. If we average just all those pixels on the left, which are classed as clothes, the yellow pixels in the middle, we'll do a pretty good job of just getting these colors, ignoring the skin, ignoring the hair. But notice in this case, it failed to notice the accessory, the bag. So we didn't do a perfect job. It does a pretty good job. And then doing this, we can do much, much better. So we can take an image on the left of this person, and this 3 by, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10, I can't see. These colors were colors picked by humans. So when we gave this image to a human and said, can you pick the color of the clothes? The first person picked these 3 colors, 2 greens and a red. This person produced a black, a green, and a red. You can see that they don't all agree, but these are the colors picked by the humans. This is what you get if you just do a straightforward dominant colors in the image. And these are the colors we get if we basically classify every pixel like this, and then just analyze the colors of the clothes. We're getting a pretty good representation of the colors. And the idea is now that we can use this system to analyze thousands and tens of thousands of images automatically in real time. And we can, because these images, most of them are geotagged on, for example, Instagram, we could do things like, let's only look at images in Stockholm, and let's only look at images that contain ladies' hats. And we can say what colors are trending in ladies' hats, like right now. This is color nowcasting. So if we can identify objects in an image, that these are the colors of the hat, of the clothes, of the bag, then we can basically say these colors are trending, for example, for formal dresses in Stockholm. These colors are trending for handbags in Sydney, for example. This is the sort of the future direction we're sort of moving in. We also have been doing some work with the virtual world, also looking, this is some images, but we also looked at Fortnite as well, which is a computer game. So in the virtual world. So again, you've got 2 images here. Model 1 is k-means. It's getting the skin color because this person has got, or because it's not a real person, there's a large amount of skin color here coming out. This is our model represented in clothes very well. Over here, you can see here again, skin color. We don't really want that. Over here, it's not a bad representation of these. So this is color nowcasting in the metaverse. So if this is a sensible idea, then you'd expect other people to be doing it. And that's exactly where we are. Most other people are doing it. And some of those people, excuse me, some of those people, to be honest, are doing it better than we are. So here's a company called Huratech in the States. They are analyzing images and providing insights, real-time insights to companies. And if you look on their web page of their customers, the number of real top companies, like the biggest brands you can imagine, are involved in this, and are all saying nice things about their Huratech system, which is quite impressive because it's quite difficult to get those. If you're a small company, it's quite difficult to get those big brands to actually agree to be on your page. So they're doing a very good job. There's also Hugh Data. I showed you their infographic at the beginning. They're based in New York, I think. They're also just generating huge amounts of data from the internet and producing reports and insights and trends, the same thing. And even WGSN, so WGSN are probably I'd say the largest trend forecasting company in the world. And this is from their website. So I don't have any more details of what they're doing because it's proprietary, but it's pretty obvious that they're doing very similar things. They're doing some sort of object detection, also grabbing colors and things like that. So I would say already the traditional color forecasting industry is being disrupted. And as we move forward, it simply cannot continue, because the process, if anyone's ever familiar with the process for color forecasting, it takes many months. It's a very long, laborious process, and it's just not equipped for the world we're heading towards, unfortunately. So the main message I think today is that we're going to see more and more of this real-time trend information in the world. I'm going to skip this because I put these slides in, which are super interesting, in case I didn't have enough time, but in case I had not enough to say. But in my experience, I normally have too much to say, not enough. So I'm going to skip them because I think I've probably used all of my time. But I do want to just finish on this slide. It's a slightly different thing. Janet mentioned it in her introduction. I'm involved in this project called the Color Literacy Project. This is led by an American lady who's an interior architect called Maggie Maggio. Some of you may know of her. It's a project which is supported by the AIC, the International Color Association, and the Inter-Society Color Council in the States. And it's basically about how we can change the way in which color is taught in the world, at schools, at primary schools, at secondary schools, at universities, at colleges, because we don't think we're getting it right at the moment. And if you want to look at that, I really encourage it. It's colorliteracy.org. And on that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Inspiring again, I must say. It's very impressive what is heading up to us, I think. Thank you very much. We will go over to question and answers in a bit. But first, I would like to say that the UData Stephen mentioned last year, I think it was on the 19th of March, Annette Lechner of UData was giving a color talk for ICA-Belgium. So if you want to find out more, just go to our YouTube channel, and there you can find her talk about UData also. And furthermore, of course, because I have it, I found it in the local bookstore. This is the 100, I will put the ISBN number in the chat in a little while. This book is written by Stephen and Maggie Maggio. And what is the nice thing about this book? It is the 100 key principles of color. And It is not a long story about every time, it's just 2 pages about one subject or another, sustainability, color trends, everything what is important once you work with color. And what is the nice thing about this book, although it's on alphabetical order, they also made it like in 9 clusters. So if you would like to know about history or about application or about communication, they put together the subject that goes into that cluster. So I really can recommend this book.
And that idea of the clusters, Jeanette, was Maggie's idea, so you can see that she's a designer.
Yes, well, great idea, because it makes it more logical in the end. Thank you very much. So I stop recording now. Thank you so much. And we go over to the question and answers. Thank you so much.